Good evening, everybody, and welcome. I'm Hunter Ohanian from the Stonewall National Museum and Archive here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It is a balmy 125 degrees here, or at least it feels like it, and it actually feels very good. And so I want everyone to say hello to my friend, Lamar Peterson. Hello, Lamar. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Hunter.
Well, it's nice to see you. Lamar and I knew each other back in Provincetown. I was the director of the Fine Arts Work Center, and Lamar was a fellow there, and actually did 2 years of fellowship there as a painting fellow. And so it was really great. It's great to connect with you this way, and also to be able to show your work through Stonewall. And so I look forward to catching up with you and seeing your work and hearing about a lot of the stuff that you've been doing. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. And so where are we finding you this evening?
I'm in Minneapolis. I currently teach at the University of Minnesota. I've been here since 2011. Originally from Florida, Central Florida, and started teaching here and haven't left since then.
Wow.
Prior to that, I was in New York for many years, and I kind of considered New York my home, actually, sometimes. But yeah, it's great to be here in an artistic community as well. So
yeah. That's great. Well, for those of you who haven't been to Stonewall, we're one of the largest LGBTQ library and archives in the United States. Our library has over 28,000 volumes, all organized under the Library of Congress system. And it's actually believed to be the largest LGBTQ library in the world. I don't really know who keeps track of those things, but apparently nobody has disagreed after all these years. It's been around for 47 years, and they're all arranged under the Library of Congress system: fiction, nonfiction, art books, oversized books, but biography. And about 10,000 people a year come to take books out, and also DVDs. And we do book clubs and readings and talks and everything else. And so it's a wonderful library in that way. In addition, we have an archive, and the archive right now is about 27 or 2,800 linear feet. And in the beginning, I didn't realize what that meant from an archive standpoint. But if you go all the way up one side of the Empire State Building and all the way down the other, that is less than 2,800 square feet or linear feet. So that shows the volume of how much stuff that we have there. It's overwhelming when you walk in the room. It's about 6 million pages of LGBTQ history. It's all been cataloged and soon will be available online. We just received a grant from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation to digitize our collection and to make that available to people. It is interesting in the collection itself, and the archive really goes back to about 1950 to the present day. And it's just about every serial and publication you can imagine from all over the United States. A lot of it has come in very passively, in the sense that people who've moved to South Florida, particularly white gay men, have donated their papers and their publications to us. And so it was a good place for them to be kept and preserved. And so what we're working on now is actually trying to diversify our holdings. We're grateful for everything that we have, but it's always been sort of unintentional, in the sense that just with things that just came in through the front door. So what's nice is that we're now on a big push to diversify what we have, and also to build an archive around contemporary work. And that's not just artwork I'm speaking about, but really what's happening in the queer community today. And so for those of you who are out there who are interested in sharing papers and ideas and things that we should be collecting, even if they're not in the forefront of what everybody knows, they will be in the future. And so a lot of those things that we have right now, nobody knew that the Christopher Street Parade or March in 1972, or even the Stonewall Uprising, were going to be important 50 years ago. But it's valuable for us to be keeping track of all of the contemporary stuff now while it's still very fresh. And so if you have things, we would love for people to be able to donate them. We started this series in the beginning of COVID, and I think this might be episode I have to look at my notes here, but this might be, this is episode 49. All of these talks, they run just an hour. And so they get archived on our website. You can see them all there. And hello to our friends on Facebook. We get a lot of visitors there. And so thank you. The way we run it is that if people are here live, we ask that you throw your questions into the chat or into the Q&A. Lamar and I will follow those, and we'll try to work them into the conversation as that goes along. I want to do, and also just so if you have friends who are interested in seeing it, know that they can download the tape of this either through YouTube or Facebook or our website. Give us about 72 hours for it to be edited and posted. I want to do a shout out to my colleague, Paula Sierra, who is behind the scenes here. And she's not able to show herself right at the moment, but she's been responsible for putting a lot of this stuff together for this talk. And so Paula, thank you for all the work that you do and making that happen. Also, I want to do a shout out to our friends at the R Fund. R Fund is one of the largest LGBTQ community foundations in the US, and they're located here in South Florida. And they actually provide support for us to be able to do closed captioning as well as translating these talks. And they also provide a small stipend for each of the artists to participate. And so, just a few other things. We have 2 exhibitions up right now. In the main gallery is Don't Ask, Do Tell, which is looking at the 225-year relationship between the LGBTQ community and the US military, starting with an officer who worked for George Washington, who was actually arrested for sodomy, all the way up to Joe Biden, who was actually the second president to make it completely open for LGBTQ people to be in the US military. Of course, Barack Obama was the first one to open all those doors. And so it's a great way of sort of understanding that whole history. And also how political things can, or actually governmental things can change so much from one election to the next. And so that exhibition will be up all summer. We just opened that in May. And so please stop by and see that. And then also, we only have a few more weeks of an exhibition called Off Our Backs, which is looking at early lesbian publications. Megan Kent from the Arts and Culture Center in Hollywood put that together for us. And it's so fascinating to look at some of these serials from, she covers the period of 1956 to 2000, where so many of the women's publications were looking at things about sexual oppression and developing identity and politics, where as opposed to a lot of the men's publications, we're looking at a lot of other things, objectifying themselves and others. And so a lot of the topics that came out of those women's serials at that time are incredibly relevant today as well. So to learn everything, of course, about Stonewall, you can just go to our website, stonewall-museum.org. You can sign up for a newsletter. I promise we don't ask for money too many times. You can always unsubscribe if you don't want to get it. And I think that's all the stuff that I have to say. If I forgot something, I'll bring it in. So let's go back to Lamar. Thank you so much for being here. It's nice to see you. We're seeing, as you say, Minneapolis has become almost your third home, I guess, at this point. You grew up here and you grew up in Central Florida, and then you lived in New York, and now you're in Minneapolis. Tell me a little bit about growing up in Florida. What was that like?
Well, it was hot. My dad was in the military, and then we moved to suburbia. I always wanted to live in New York, and I always fantasized about moving to New York when I was younger. So when I had the opportunity to go to grad school, which was RISD, I was close to that I had ever been to where I wanted to be. Right now, I'm pretty happy with where I'm based currently. We do have really strong artistic community here. The weather is we're sort of feeling the effects of climate change. Right now, it's really been a hot summer here. So that makes me think and can relate to a lot of my friends and family that are in Florida, because we've had 90 degrees weather for much of the summer. So yeah, I guess in a way I haven't left. I still have I took the weather with me, basically.
Tell me a little bit about what it was like living in suburbia when you were a kid. Did you feel included, excluded? Did it feel part of the real world? What was that like?
There were good and bad aspects of it. Obviously, I think we were the first African American family in the neighborhood that I lived in at the time, and that was probably late '80s or early '90s. And that experience works its way into my work with a lot of experiences in my life. I think my artwork is kind of pseudo self-portraiture in a way. Sometimes they look like me, sometimes they don't. Gender doesn't really matter as much either. But the work is really about getting older, living a life, having a history. And often, I really don't know what it's about, and I'm okay with that. I think I like the mystery of art being left to the interpretation of the viewer. And, I will probably talk about inspiration a lot more than I will about what it means, because, I really do like when the viewer is able to, come to the work and walk away with their own interpretation.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, and it's really it's something that a lot of people I think can relate to. But I'll tell you one thing, only from another perch that I had, which was running a art historian association for many years at CAA. Just be sure that you bank away or you lock away somewhere what the work really is about. So that you're gone, and 100 years from now or 200 years from now, instead of an art historian putting her or his own thing on top of it, that at least there'll be some kind of record as to what the work it's. I totally agree with you about letting the viewer look at the work and judge the work today. And I'm being somewhat facetious when I say it, but it's just like art historians do take a fair amount of liberty with interpretation of artist work, particularly if the artist is so generous as to be dead at the time that they want to interpret the work. They're not so good about interpreting the work when the artist is alive, but if the artist is not alive, they have a lot to say about it.
I totally agree with that. And I think, I do have some writing that I have stored away. So good advice. It's good advice for any artist, for sure.
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely true. And of course, that's just the nature of what art history and the canon is today, that there's obviously certain things that things have to be looked at. So Minneapolis, you were telling me earlier before we started the show, you just got tenure there. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Tell us about the art department there.
The art department is really great. We have a BFA program as well as a grad program, new facility, fairly new facility as well. I believe about 15 years old. So it's a great institution to work at. The University of Minnesota really supports their faculty as well. So I'm happy to be here, as well as the art community locally here is really strong and exciting as well. So it's a great place to be.
And you and I connected, I don't know, about a year ago, and you had said at the time that you were in Minneapolis and that there were a lot of the George Floyd protests and the Black Lives Matter protest, and some of them were like right down the street from where you were living. What's it been like to be in Minneapolis when a lot of that stuff was going on last summer?
Yeah, it was really challenging and difficult for myself and the community at large. We are maybe a little over a mile from where he was murdered, and not too far, also maybe less than a mile from where the fires were and where the protests were happening as well. So we were here in the middle of it, and we were part of it as well. That mentally and socially, everything you can think of, and it was really challenging for me, and like I said, the community, and that worked its way into my artwork as well. So I'm going to talk about that later on, about how living through that affected my work. But since then, the community has come together. There's been a lot of social engagement and interest in helping people here, and art being made and people coming together. So I think, you know, there's some positive things may come out of that, you know, I hope. And we will just progress and grow as a community, as well as this country will progress and grow as well.
Yeah. I guess all we can do is remain hopeful, and also I think remain vigilant and trying to not settle for things, and trying to make sure that all of this work has not been in vain, and that we can actually try to make some real change. I think
Absolutely.
that's really important.
Absolutely, every day. I mean, we all need to do our best to try to, you know, help make change for sure.
Yeah. So last calendar or last academic year, I take it you were teaching remotely.
Yeah.
And you were teaching painting, and what else?
I was teaching painting, I believe, advanced drawing. It was extremely difficult to you know, teach art online, for me at least. You know, not for everyone, not for all my colleagues. For me, I had you know, it was a challenging time as well. Right. To be able to engage with students. I like to, you know, be able to see their faces, and, you know, you can't, you know, we're all behind masks, so the smiles and all the
Sure.
Nonverbal things that we do to connect with people weren't happening. So obviously, you know, everybody can connect and understand that, but teaching young people, you know, I think a lot of the students felt cheated, or not necessarily because of me, but just everything that was happening in the world, that they weren't able to see their friends in class, and we had, you know, social distancing at the University of Minnesota as well. So, you know, students were separated in different, even though they're in one classroom, in different spaces. So it was a lot to do, and we're going to still continue that this year as well. But I think we're more prepared, and I'm more prepared as well. If we do have to go remote, I'll make the best of it and do the best I can. And I think students also step up.
I have a friend who the last year was teaching ceramics online at Penn State, and I just, you know, the tactile nature of teaching ceramics and wanting to sort of get your hands in there, and then having this barrier. I mean, I know people are doing a great job at it, but it still seems so challenging, even like with paint, for example, to not being able to be with somebody right there where you're looking at what actually is happening to the substance that they're mixing, and what they're doing, and how to get the right effect of what you're looking at. It's very challenging to, I mean, I don't know that we could, sure, there have been online classes for a while, but they just have never substituted for what it means to be with an accomplished artist in the studio, and someone who knows technique. And it's not just about content now. I mean, at least the content piece, you know, that we can do through online stuff, but the idea of being with the materials and not being face to face with somebody, and face to face with the materials while they're looking at it, just seems to be a challenge. I mean, I don't know how you guys are doing it, quite frankly.
Absolutely, totally agree. I mean, painting, you know, you need to see the surface. You know, there's so much beyond just the image. So I again, you know, I struggle with that, because at one point students were taking photographs of their own work and they were uploading it, and sometimes they weren't lit well, and, you know, it can be no fault of their own. It's just they don't have the space to light their work well. So all that, you know, in trying to struggle and see a small painting on a screen, and not being able to really see the work and really give feedback, it was, you know, a bit of a challenge, like you said.
Sure. No, and the thing is, like, I mean, you can be with a student in a studio, and they can have a piece of work here, and I don't know about you, but I might turn it this way just to look at it under a different light, or that way, or something else, if you have the piece right there. But you can't do it in that context.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, so are you going back to, at University of Minnesota, is it going to be in person, or is it going to be virtual, or is it going to be hybrid, or what?
It's going to be hybrid. We've, you know, obviously given professors that the option as well. You know, some professors cannot return, or faculty or lecturers can't return because of health reasons, and they'll have the ability to choose what's best for their health and their family. But I will be hybrid. I will be mostly in person, and our facility has done an amazing, our technicians, amazing job in making sure that everybody has what their needs, and the policies and procedures going to be followed. So yeah, I have no doubts that, I think it'd be safe, and it's as much as possible we can try to make it enjoyable and have a good learning environment for everybody.
Yeah. So in the 10 years that you've been there, have you been able to sort of see careers progress and see people really develop a good artistic practice and enter into a career part where they're facing in a positive way the production of new work?
Yeah, for sure. You mean friends or just students?
Students, yeah.
Oh, sure. Students. I have a lot of students that moved to New York City and are making it a go there, and students that have gone on to become pre-med. It's really diverse, actually. But students, the talent here is really, really great, and you can have an art degree in art education. You can take it in so many different places. It's really up to what the artist, the young person wants to do. They can make it work. And I just tell my students all the time, do and study what you love, and it all fall into place. And that's what happened to me, basically. I originally went to an architecture program and just wasn't happy with it, and also found out I was dyslexic as well. And just returned to what my first love was, art, and came easy to me. I didn't really have to work hard to make a painting or a drawing, but all the algebra for architecture I was failing in. So yeah.
So for you, do you think it was the drawing part? It was the visual representation that you found easiest?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, since I was a young person, I could draw and paint, and yeah.
Did you have other artists in your family?
My dad is a great drafts person. He painted when I was younger, and I used to watch him paint in oil when I was a young person. Yeah, he doesn't do it so much anymore, but when he was younger, he was really talented.
Yeah. And so, as you said, you went on to RISD. You went to RISD undergrad, right?
No. I went to Florida A&M for undergrad, and then
you went to RISD graduate school.
Yeah, and then the Fine Arts Work Center, and then a couple other residencies, and then New York.
Right. Yeah. And so it's interesting thinking about in that career, which, believe it or not, was what, 20 years now of work, or 5 years of work. Do you feel from an art making standpoint that there are different periods, like clear defined periods of your work?
I think so. I generally have series that are ongoing, and I will return to them. But I for sure definitely think there are keystone times or whatever. When I moved here is when I started to return to oil and scaled up the work quite a bit. Prior to that, I was living in New York. Studio space was an issue, so I was working on paper mostly. A lot of my early work is on paper because it was just the pricing, and it was affordable and easy to transport, and like I said, studio space was really really expensive there, so paper made sense. And then when I got here, I had a really nice studio, a lot of space, so I was like, now's the time to return to working oil and scale up the work. And yeah.
And so there have been different periods, and we've talked a little bit about kind of different parts of the spectrum, of the time spectrum, but we've talked a little bit about your life in suburbia, and perhaps that did work its way into your work at some period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think we talked a little bit about another time more recently, and I think that's some of the work that you're going to be showing us, which is some work which reflects kind of the darkness of the last 4 or 5 years, and through the Trump years and through a lot of the social upheaval. But are there other bright points like those that have affected your work?
It's funny. It's hard to answer that question, because I can look back at a painting and think about a particular time in my life, but when I'm there and making the work, I'm not thinking about time so much. I guess this last show I did because it was about George Floyd's murder and like you said, the Trump years. But before that, they were more inspired by pop culture and advertisements and cartoons and all the stuff I love as a kid and still love as an adult. that I collect, like children's book illustrations from the 50s and 60s and 70s,
Mhm.
all that stuff. It was mostly about that, mostly, you know, and landscapes. So a combination of Florida landscape with a Bob Ross type landscape, you know, it's just crazy,
Yeah.
like the silly things that, you know, I like and enjoy. That was what inspired the work. But now I guess the work is becoming more specific and relating to a time and a space, and also thinking about how things are changing really quickly in the world. It seems like
Sure.
everything's just speeding up so fast. you know.
Yeah, and it is moving very fast. I don't know about you, but I've noticed that as I get older, time moves much faster than it did
Yes.
before, and also we see things happen around us so rapidly now. I think you can share your screen. Let's stop talking about the work, and let's take a look at some of it.
Okay. All right. Are you able to see my screen there?
I can.
Okay. Let me start this slide slow. All right. All right. So like I mentioned before, I have an example of an early work on paper. I worked a lot on paper when I was in New York City, and like I said, it was just affordable and versatile, as well as just easy. If I had a small studio or sharing a studio with someone, I just needed a table to make this work. So this is a really early piece, and it might be around 2001, I believe. And at the time, I was looking at a lot of pop culture stuff, like commercials and cartoons and old advertisements that really influenced a lot of this work. But also rooting it in my own history as an African-American queer man and growing up in Florida. So yeah, so I thought I would really focus on the work of the last 10, 15 years. So like I mentioned earlier, I moved here in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, and had this lot of space to work. So I was like, okay, I'm going back to oil. I've always loved working oil before I was working in acrylic. And I returned to a motif I was working with called picture in a picture, or bubbles. And basically elements of the composition structurally make up a circle or a square. And this piece is entitled Bliss. And basically you have a young man enjoying his garden. I like gardening a lot. Even when I'm not able to do it, I really like watching shows about it, or just visiting our arboretum here or wherever I am traveling. So, again, thinking about landscape, thinking about flowers and gardens and stuff, it's always been part of the work, and continues to be really important. So within the bubble here, you have, yeah, sorry.
I was going to say also, though, what's beautiful about this piece for me is it talks about a domestic life. It talks about a domestic tranquility, that one's home should be, or could be, or can be. It doesn't have to should be, but it can be sort of this perfect idolized place where one can just, I assume that is the figure's house in the background, looking so quaint and sweet and everything, and that's his garden. And man, every flower in his garden is giving him a big smile, and
Yeah,
they're all lovely they all have great fragrance as well too. And so
that's great that you can smell the flower. If you saw this painting in person within the bubble, it's really thickly applied paint, really expressionistic kind of brush strokes, and then flatness on the outside. And a lot of my work is a combination between somewhere flat and more painterly. And also was thinking idea of the bubbles can be popped too, it maybe won't exist forever. So the surface of the work, you have this kind of utopian, maybe happy facade, and then sometimes it can be something a little bit dark underneath, maybe even more sinister. But again, that can always left to the viewer to interpret whatever they see. And I love hearing people's thoughts on any of my work.
Sure.
Oh, I should just keep moving. And next up we have another large scale piece that's called Satin Sheets. And this was, I think, inspired by a man being bedridden or not wanting to leave the bed. So he's taking all of his food and meals in bed here. But again, the composition kind of makes this rectangle shape. The lines are making this rectangle shape, the bed sheets and stuff. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Like, again, it's a really thickly applied paint, and I actually use paper plates as palettes sometime in the studio as well. So maybe that's what inspired thinking about plates and paper plates having food or paint on them.
Yeah. But there's also something about this piece when I saw it earlier today where obviously with the subject's face, there's a certain amount of distress going on in the face there. But then also the idea, at least for me, that when I see somebody eating this much in bed and sort of, I think about sickness and I think about some kind of problem going on in their life. And I'm wondering how much of that you were trying to portray with this piece.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I think I deal with challenges of life through my work as well as the joys as well. So, you have both ends of that in all this work, I believe. Also, it's probably inspired by painters I love like Gibson as well, and other amazing paintings that use the bed in some way. For sure, Gibson's work was definitely a big influence, I think.
What do you think about all the recent brouhaha about the shows about Gibson?
I just don't understand it, really. I think that for anyone, I mean, his work would really truly speak to the time that we're living in, and I'm thankful that show will, see the light of day soon. So.
Thank you. I'm so happy to hear you say that, because I think some of these comments about it have been, and actually I've been somewhat pissed off by it, because I think they think we're not smart enough to understand this, and so they had to cancel it or they had to postpone it, and people couldn't spend 2 seconds to actually understand what the work is about and what he was trying to say. I mean, it's crazy.
Absolutely. So here's the installation from the show. I show in a gallery of Richardson Fraser in New York City, and they this was a show I believe it was called sorry, I think it was related to gardening, basically. Weekend Gardener, I believe, was the title. And again, the motifs of this show was basically bubbles or circles, picture in a picture. Again, we have garden tools here. Off in the back there, walking towards the house, there's the gardener walking towards his home, and he has the can in his hand, the watering can. And, sometimes I'm thinking about time and a lack of time, actually, as well. So you have him with the can, watering can, walking to his home, but also the can's up in the foreground. In the last piece, there was a man in the doorway, and he was also in the foreground as well. So yeah, these were a lot of fun to make, and like I said, these were the early works of my return to working in oil, but I had a really great time making them.
What's the size? Just out of curiosity, what's the size?
Sure. Yeah, I with some titles and sizes, I may get that wrong, but they're average, I think 64 to 70 inches is probably right. Oil on canvas.
That's what I would think.
Yeah.
Based upon that installation shot, that's what I thought. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I think I have a lot of images, so if I go too fast, tell me to slow down. That's totally fine. Okay. Another one, again, same show, and I think this was called Red Barn, and you have this man who's leaped off the embankment there into the water. Maybe it's too hot. Again, at the time, I don't remember why I had him jumping into the water, but maybe he wanted to swim with all his clothes on. Who knows? So again, same idea. I think this was inspired by a thrift store painting, which I really like thrift store paintings a lot, and I think I found it actually in Florida and brought it up to here. No, actually New York, and then I had it with me for a long time. So a lot of this stuff I collect shows its way, and it works its way into the painting somehow. It may not be immediate, but they definitely influence the work.
And so in this one, I see something slightly different, to the extent that particularly the way the figure is landing in the water and the splashes around the water, and the way the water is rippling there. And you have said that certainly you have been attracted at cartoons over the years, and so as opposed to some of the other pieces, I see a little bit more of that influence in this piece.
Yeah, it's there and it's not sometimes, depending on the work, on the painting. I think I have the idea of style, developing a style, developing a unique vision for artists. I think that's important if you want to sell your work in the art world. And sometimes I think I push back against that a little bit, so sometimes if some work looks a little more cartoony or stylized and than others and looks more realistic, maybe. So it really, I don't edit or care, I have an idea and I'll make it. And if I think it's good, I'll show it. If I have a lot of failed work that just leans against the wall in the studio because I'm not ready to finish it, or I just don't think it works. So.
Yeah, I get you.
This piece is called A Young Man with a Fish, and it was part of a series of 4 paintings, I believe. And they just have this reclining man under a tree with the dappled lighting. And initially I was going to put a book there beside him, but I wanted something a little more challenging that would challenge the viewer a little bit more. So you have a fish there with a big bite out of it. And maybe that's the pond where he's pulled it out of. Why did he bite it? I don't know. You can interpret however you like. Yeah, so this painting, it was the first of the series, and then it continued on to other versions as well. Initially,
so he's holding the fish here, I say.
Yeah, initially I'm a big fan of films as well, movies. I watch a lot of movies, and I thought I was going to have kind of like your cinematography, like you're coming in closer or panning in closer on a scene, and you'd have every aspect, or like a flip book, whatever. But then I thought about doing that, and I started it, and then it got overwhelming. I just couldn't keep making the paintings. Got bored. I get bored very easily with my work, so I just couldn't see that idea through. So, but the paintings that came out of it, I'm happy with, and yeah.
The work that you did in both of these paintings with the dappled light is really so beautiful. Was that something that actually took you a long time to resolve in a way that you were happy with? Because I mean, I look at his face and the background and his clothes and everything else about it. It's so beautifully rendered.
Thank you. Yeah, it did take a long time. Returning the oil, like I said, I was working with acrylic, so I had to really figure it out. I still wanted that flatness. Yeah, with acrylic paint, but I was working oil, so there's a lot of experimentation, like how to make oil paint looks flatter than it normally does. But yeah,
and of course you give us so many treats here as well too, because his left eye, of course, is totally in the shadow, and then his right eye is in the shadow as well too, but there's the reflection of the dappled light coming off his cuff, which is illuminating that side of his face, as well as illuminating his cheek and his lips as well too. And so you're using the light in such a complex way, even though it feels so simple on the one hand, but it's so complex in the way you've actually rendered it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, when you look at in true life and look at dapple lighting in a real space, it doesn't necessarily look like this, but I was thinking more about the feeling of it, and this is exaggerated interpretation of it, obviously, but
sure,
yeah.
But you depict sort of the fantasy of that so well here. I think it's really beautiful.
Thank you. So that's kind of bringing me up to my most recent show. I just recently had a solo exhibition in New York City. And like you mentioned, Hunter, earlier, a lot of the work was or has been inspired by current life and social political stuff's popped up a lot more. during the lockdown in the early stages of the pandemic, I didn't have access to my studio, so I was kind of going nuts, and also trying to teach remotely and working at home, making drawings mostly, and then watching the world outside my door here, which was a lot of, like I said, the protests and the anger and the marches, and also, again, like people coming together and people helping each other. It was really intense. And so I really wanted to make a show about that, and also about the stress of and anger of living under the Trump administration as well. So all of that kind of inspired this work I'm going to show you for this final kind of bit of my talk here. So I started thinking a lot about walking and walking for myself, protesting, as well as walking to escape, just to get away, because working all day and working on the computer and walking, the park was the only thing that most of us could do, if we were lucky, to go for a walk. So for me, walking was really, really important thing for my own psyche and being able to get through that time. So these walkers here kind of have these colors of flashes of light. So I was thinking about the idea of, the air between someone's legs, if they could like flash light, like a light in colors and flashing on and off. So we have here, we have maybe the same person, again, maybe it's me, on either side of the embankment here. Maybe that's the Mississippi as well. Again, I like to leave a lot of that to the viewer to interpret, but yeah, and if you have any question, I can kind of answer that if you do. But that's mostly what I was thinking about at the time. And again, the water is really, really thickly applied paint. It's called, this is called troubled water. I think, again, it kind of reflects the time that I was living at, a year ago in Minnesota, Minneapolis.
And so I look at it, let's go back. So, my first look, of course, and when I saw this, is that I did see two different people here. I saw the individual in the foreground, but then also saw the person walking in the back here as well too. But I think what you're saying as well is that you want all of us to make our own decisions about what's going on with these individuals, because I could easily see that somebody could interpret this beyond race or gender, and they could certainly interpret it beyond individuals and think this is a multitude of individuals, but that there might be a certain cloak that they're putting on, and there is something which is very disparate, in the sense there is this chasm, this river that's between them, and the way they connect to it, again, I would say, is really up to interpretation.
Yeah, again, there's always generally a lapse of time. Sometimes time is not really an issue in my work. So again, the young man walking is also time as well. Maybe it's not multiple figures. Maybe it's just one person walking. Again, it may not answer everybody's questions about it, but I kind of like that there are questions in my work. I don't really want it to be easy. I rather people kind of work a little bit, look a little longer, maybe see something different when they look again, yeah.
And one more question before we move on to the next one. How much of a sketch did you do of this beforehand, not from a technical standpoint, but to lay it out from a compositional standpoint?
Yeah, I do a lot of drawing. I really haven't had a lot of opportunities just to show drawings, but a lot of this work, a lot of the paintings come out of just drawing, drawing when I'm watching a movie, whatever, or even sometimes when I'm watching my students' work, I'll get an idea, then jot it down really quickly, and then, rethink that and draw it again. And so this definitely was a drawing that had different iterations earlier. but ended up here. Yeah.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. Sorry.
No need to apologize. So the same kind of idea. You know, I was really again thinking about the individual, but also the individual becoming a crowd, and like the marches here, which were happening every day at some point, and also you know all over worldwide as well. So you know, looking at the news and being aware of what's happening in the world. But this piece is called A Path. I think it's called A Shortcut, I believe. And again, I walk a park almost every day with my dogs or myself, and you know, this person's decided to, you know, not follow the path and take a shortcut basically. And behind him, you have versions of himself, and again, you have flashes of light and color that kind of I hope kind of mimic the action of walking. So that's what I was thinking about when I was making this. I showed this piece to my mother, and she said, "This actually really looks like you. Like some paintings look like me, sometimes they don't, or sort of do. And sometimes I don't even want them to look like me, but they do. I think a lot of artists when they paint, they when they're painting a human figure, their work ends up looking like them somehow. But my work totally does mostly."
Yeah. I haven't been in the same space with you for 10 years or more, so it's hard for me to be able to say that. But I think what's kind of interesting, though, is that this is the first time in the slides that you've been showing us this evening that I'm actually seeing a feminization of the male form in the smaller forms here, in the sense that the way they're presented here, it's almost a perfect dress that they're wearing or skirt that the figure's wearing here.
Well, I wouldn't. The color between the legs is mostly just supposed to be air, basically, or flashes of wind when somebody's walking. You know, so they're the small little characters here are wearing the same clothing outfit as the main one here. But again, like the first piece, the first piece prior to this image. Certain characters have color between your legs.
Yep. No, and it's just the way it fills out, and the way they've ended up coming out here is really sort of interesting. Anyway, just an observation.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. You know, there was a lot of anger at that time. I was definitely angry as well. And this is a ongoing series called The Poets, and this is poet number 2. And at the time I was thinking of spoken word artists, you know, poets, hip hop artists, and their ability to make change with their art, which is very different in mine. So I was thinking, how can I interpret anger and language and voice? And here you have a lot of just emoji kind of explosions or pop culture explosions from, you know, Batman or whatever, and to stand in place of bombs or explosions, or, you know, yeah. You know, actually talking about my work is like being in a psychiatrist chair, because I don't really, you know, I'm saying things out loud, you know, that's when sometimes it's more clear to me.
Yeah, sure. But it goes back to what we were saying before about, you know, the role of art historians in the future. You might as well get as much of this stuff out there, you know, as you can now.
Well, you can't avoid it. You can't avoid it now, I mean, because we have the internet, we have Zoom. So it's all, you know, it's all being filmed and it's all being stored somewhere. So that's totally different than Picasso's time, obviously. Or, yeah.
Right.
And that's good and bad for me, because I'm really much introvert and really quiet generally, and you know, don't like to draw too much attention to myself. But for me, my art is a way to kind of, you know, be that really outgoing person and talk a lot. So.
Well, I'm so happy to hear you. I'm so happy to hear you say that. And here we go. Is it no good? You can go on to the next one, but it's another good example of it. In the sense, having known you, I do think of you as being somewhat introverted in that way, but yet your work is so bright in so many ways, and it doesn't scream, look at me, but there is this sort of desire to actually project something very important, not necessarily, not always positive, but just you're projecting stuff out there in the work.
Yeah, for sure. I don't consider my work to be pretty pictures, or I mean, I think they're a little bit, some often more than others are challenging. And I really, that's good. And that's where I want it to be, you know, but I also want people to like looking at it as well. So, you could, again, I get really bored with my own works. I try new things, and if something doesn't work, that's totally fine. I'll move on. But sometimes new things pop up, and new experiments turn to new ideas. And this is a good example of it. This is actually an ongoing series of pieces I call the scramble face portraits. I think I made my first one in 2005. Basically, the background is painted in acrylic and gouache, and then on top you have the face being created out of detritus, pieces of paper. Initially, it was like crap that was on the floor of my studio that I swept up and just throw down with glue. And now they're a little bit more organized. But paint swatches, old books I find, and coloring books, and interesting papers from gifts, all kinds of junks in there. Sandpaper, fake dollar bill. That's not a real dollar bill. I didn't tear up any money, anybody, so don't yell at me. Stickers. So when you look really close, there's looks like a scrambled mess, and then further away you see the face comes more into focus. And this piece is called Distraught. And the second one is titled Euphoric, I believe, is Euphoric. And really, again, sorry, I forget my titles. Yeah, Euphoric, I believe, is the title for this one. These are a lot of fun to make. I really enjoyed making them. Again, you know, it's just pasting and paper down, and just having the experience of it, the face evolving, you know, coming. I slowly start to see a face happening. So they're really enjoyable to make, I think.
So on the piece itself, those are actually applied to the canvas as opposed to, got it, okay.
Yep, there's collage right on top. How are we doing on time there? We're pretty good?
We're good.
Okay.
We're good.
Okay. We're close to actually. So this piece also was included in the show. And again, I really been looking and thinking about abstraction a lot. I've been looking at a lot of abstract painters and thinking about the crowd as also an abstraction too. You know, if further away from a crowd, you don't really see faces, you just see colors and skin colors or clothing. And, you know, so again, we have this figure, myself maybe, walking through a landscape is titled A Path Through the Woods. And again, thinking of, you know, passing through maybe a dark and scary woods and coming out the other side. Yeah, you know, again, this is an ongoing series, and we'll see how they progress and develop.
Well, and also I think what's amazing about this too is that there's a degree of interpretation which is possible, where some of the figures are in the light and some of the figures are in darkness here. And so, you know, there are those that might be participating in something or being victimized by something. And then for each of them, there's so many other people that are not participating or nothing is happening to.
Yeah, for me, I was thinking more like when you're going through a forest and you have dark parts of the forest where there's no light, maybe, or trees are really dense, or for the, you know, like plant life and all that. So you have bright spots where the sun's coming through, and you have those dark spots of the forest. So again, kind of thinking about that, how it was for me and others and everybody to get through well, we haven't gotten through the pandemic yet, but pandemic, and also, you know, the uprising and social change that was happening as well, you know, and the highs and lows of that mentally as well. So a metaphor.
And also I have to say, you know, it's not a surprise, but I have to say, in comparison to some of your work, I mean, a piece like this is so amazingly complex compared to some other work that you might have been making 10 or 15 years ago.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you for noticing that.
So,
yeah.
It's very sophisticated, Lamar. This is an amazing piece.
Yeah, thank you, and you know, again, it's just started out of just an experiment or you know, an idea that I thought wasn't going to work, but I kept working with it and kept trying to develop it. So yeah, I'm excited to see where it'll take me. We'll see.
Yep.
All right, and again, the same idea, and I can't remember the title of this one. I think it was walking on the beach or something like that. And I was probably thinking about obviously Florida and the beaches in Florida, the tides. It was low tide is the title. It came to me. Low tide. So the idea of the tide moving in and moving out, and again, that serving as a metaphor for life as well. So again, you have the same character, or interpret it as a crowd of people as well. Walking over a really strange beach landscape where a lot of stuff gets pulled in from the ocean and left on the beach. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Again, the same flashing of light. The orange is supposed to again represent action and movement of the figure moving across the surface of the space. Yeah. So. And finally, I've been working, rethinking coloring books. I have a huge collection of coloring books, especially coloring books from the 60s and 70s and 80s. And I get a lot of that stuff from thrift stores and eBay, and people give them to me as well. And here I actually used an image from a coloring book and had it printed on inkjet. And then over the surface of that, the figure here and the color in the background is oil paint, basically. And this is, I believe, called Past the Old Bridge. So this character is passing a bridge behind them. And currently I'm having the same images or images like this printed on canvas and working larger, making these works larger on canvas. And they're so far are really been a lot of fun. And yeah, I'm excited to show them in the future.
Great, great. It's funny because you can really see sort of the future, the potential for the future in this particular piece and how much will be happening.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to stop my share here, and if anybody has any questions, do we have enough time for questions?
We do. I don't see. I think all the chats and stuff are here, and I'm not able to see the ones on Facebook. So I think we'll have to leave it here. But so here you are at this point, sort of the middle of your professional career. You've been making work. You've been teaching for 10 years or so. Obviously, there's been all the political upheaval, which has been very important. But talk a little bit about what it's like being a professional artist today. And it's not like you're getting your BFA or your MFA. You've now made it. You've figured out how to have a career. You figured out how to have good shows. You figured out how to actually look at work, to collect things that you're interested in visually, and to make work. How does it feel? How does it feel to have gotten to that point?
I think for me, like getting older, I'm learning every day with my work, and I learn from my students. I learn from my partner. I learn from you know, people in the neighborhood, the community here. I don't necessarily feel like I've made it. I don't think, and I don't know. I really want to keep discovering and pushing myself and learning new things, making new work, making work that I can look back on and not be embarrassed about, making work for myself. And I tell my students that the best way to do that is to make work for yourself and not for a collector or a market, to really focus on what you are excited about and what you love about your practice and your work. And that's what I try to do. You know, that said, I have blocks too. I had a huge artistic block for 4 years and didn't know what to do and couldn't figure out how to move forward. but I got through that, and happy to say that now I'm in the studio. I've been making a lot of work this summer, and I'm really looking forward to showing that work in the future, because living here is a little different than my experience in New York City. I mean, I could have curators or people come by easier there, and I'm not complaining at all about my situation here. In a way, it's nice to be working in a bubble, no pun intended, and being able to have close my door in the studio, not have anybody come by until I'm ready. So, I'm really excited to just keep making work and have the ability to make work. You know, I really am happiest when I'm alone in the studio.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, it's great. And of course, when I say having made it, of course, that's a very loaded term in the art world. And certainly I don't mean to say like, because there are many people who think, oh, you have to be Jeff Koons to have made it, or on the cover of Art Forum. But I just have such admiration for your work and for your career to be making work that you really care about, and to presumably have a nice living wage, and to show your work, and to have an audience, and to be able to have conversations about it, whether they're age peers or artistic peers, or younger or older, or those, and feel like you're actually making this work. In a funny way, it seems almost idyllic, where we all want to aspire to be on the cover of Art Forum, but that's not what being an artist is about. I mean, it's been twisted into that. That's what a definition of being an artist is about. I think in this talk tonight, it really feels like somebody who's kind of found the confidence of being able to make the work that he wants to make, and be engaged in the production in a very real way.
Yeah, I feel really lucky, and I'm just thankful that people care, or they want to see this stuff or talk about it, and I, that's exciting for me. And I just want to keep doing it. And a lot of artists haven't had the opportunity this past year to make work. Maybe they couldn't go to their studios or through illness. So I'm thankful for what I have, for sure. Absolutely.
That's great. Well, Lamar, it's great to see you. It's great to catch up with you. Thank you so much for spending time with us today, and for sharing your work. I hope, I know you'll be coming to Florida because you still have family here. And if you ever get down to Miami and Fort Lauderdale, I hope you look us up, because it would be great to actually see you here. And I'd love to give you a tour of Stonewall.
I would love that. I've actually been waiting to visit because of the pandemic, but when I do, I will definitely let you know, for sure.
All right. Great to see you. Thank you.
Here.
All right.
Bye, everyone.